아래 당도 되지 저게도 가르치 버릴람나 난 전시선바 되지 안에
Good afternoon. So this morning we looked at the misconception and that needed to be eliminated, which was the misconception about whether the bodhisattva or the aspirant bodhisattva should train in the similar way to those beings of the Theravada tradition, the heroes and solitary realizers, looking at the faults of samsara, seeing how there's nothing of any abiding value to be found in samsara, and thereby giving rise to a disenchantment for samsara, a revulsion towards samsara, and thereby giving rise to the wish to gain liberation from samsara. So there we looked at that doubt and the Lama Tsongkhapa's many responses to it. Returning immediately to the text, the last sentence of the section. So I've just needed to change the order of the English a little bit, moving one section, one segment of the sentence, so that it's in the correct sequence. So let me get this right. So page 179. The intention of 400 stanzas, clearly set forth by the great master Chandrakirti in his commentary on this text, is after developing revulsion for cyclic existence, to see those sentient beings as one's relatives, and thus generate bodhicitta for their sake. So I'll read it again. The intention of 400 stanzas, clearly set forth by the great master Chandrakirti in his commentary on this text, is, after developing revulsion for cyclic existence, to see those sentient beings as one's relatives, and thus generate bodhicitta for their sake. So Lama Tsongkhapa here is referencing another source for what he has presented by means of a response to this misconception. And so the reason, as the translator, I'll just change the order so that it matches the Tibetan, is because this is the order that the aspirant bodhisattva trains in order to become a bodhisattva. So the practitioner first strives to develop a revulsion for cyclic existence. So this is looking at the faults of samsara in the way that has been described, developing a revulsion for cyclic existence. And from there, it leads to, the aspirant bodhisattva trains in seeing sentient beings as one's relatives. In other words, to generate a warmth, a closeness towards all sentient beings. And then, which is the prerequisite for the other steps to train in order to generate bodhicitta for their sake. So the for their sake was missed. So this is the sequence of training that a practitioner needs to engage in order to become a bodhisattva. And this was stated clearly by Chandrakirti in his commentary to the 400 stanzas. Aspirant bodhisattvas will reflect deeply, as has been presented, on the faults of samsara, recognizing that there's nothing of any abiding value in samsara and developing a disenchantment for samsara. And they will look clearly at the causes, the causes that lead to samsara being constructed, namely contaminated karma and afflictions, and develop a determination to abandon karma and the afflictions, or contaminated karma and the afflictions. However, they do not aspire for the peace of liberation. They aspire to abandon contaminated karma and afflictions, but not to attain and abide in the peace of liberation. Rather, they, as it says in the sentence, they train to see all sentient beings as one's relatives and thus generate bodhicitta for their sake. This points to the reason why the bodhisattva strives to abandon contaminated karma and the afflictions. It's for the sake of beings that they've developed a closeness towards. Whereas the hero and solitary realizer, they strive to abandon the contaminated karma and afflictions, but in order to attain the peace of liberation, to abide in the lasting, stable happiness of liberation. So this clears up the doubt that an aspirant bodhisattva or a new bodhisattva would be drawn to the peace of liberation through having developed a revulsion for samsara. But here we see from the previous sutra quotation and now from the quotation from Aryadeva's 400 stanzas that the bodhisattva, whilst being determined to abandon the afflictions together with their seeds, are doing so as to be of ever greater benefit for others, not to attain their own peace. Let's talk briefly about some terminology which could be all too easily misunderstood. So as you've heard many times, a state of liberation where one is liberated from the sufferings of samsara, liberated from the suffering realms of samsara, comes about with the abandonment of the afflictions together with their seeds. That is the state of liberation. So when you hear about the attainment of liberation, don't think that that is necessarily, the state of liberation is necessarily what is attained by heroes and solitary realizers. They do attain the state of liberation. But the state of that Buddhas attain when they have abandoned the afflictions together with the seeds and the stains of those afflictions is also called liberation. So the state of Buddhahood can also be called liberation. And if there in the text it's the state of liberation is mentioned in its fullest term, it would be called great liberation. Another word for great liberation is Buddhahood. Another word for it is nirvana, and again there are different nirvanas. The nirvana that is attained by a Buddha is non-abiding nirvana. So again, one can hear the word nirvana, but if it relates to the state of Buddhahood, then it would be in its, although it's often written in abbreviated form, it would be non-abiding nirvana. Just like liberation can refer to the state of Buddhahood, and therefore the word liberation is written in its long form, it would be great liberation. So it should be clear that this term liberation may refer to the state of peace that is attained by heroes and solitary realizers, but it may also be that's attained by bodhisattvas when they become Buddhas, namely great liberation. So hopefully that's clear in the usage of this term liberation. But when you hear about a state of peace, that is a term that would solely be used in relation to the liberation of heroes and solitary realizers, of the Theravada practitioners. They're striving for that state of peace. The state of liberation refers to liberation from the sufferings of samsara, the suffering or liberation from the suffering realms of samsara, and it is attained by means of abandoning the afflictions together with their seeds. Practitioner will give rise to a mind striving for liberation when they have recognized that the suffering nature of samsara by reflecting on the faults of samsara, true sufferings, as well as by reflecting on the origin, the causes of suffering, true origins, namely contaminated karma and afflictions. And this attitude that is determined to abandon the afflictions and thereby contaminated karma in order to, through abandoning the afflictions together with their seeds, this is the mind striving for liberation, which is also called the mind of definite emergence. It's two different words, but the meaning is the same. The mind of definite emergence, the mind striving for liberation. And what is being strived for is a state liberated from the suffering realms of samsara. When that state is attained, the person attains a state of lasting, stable happiness, a happiness that isn't punctuated by even the slightest of suffering because the causes have been eradicated, the afflictions together with their seeds. So this is now a key point that has been described thus far. The meaning of the minds of definite emergence or mind striving for liberation. What these two terms mean. Now, how to fulfill the objective of the mind of definite emergence, or the mind striving for liberation, the attainment, which is the attainment of the lasting, stable happiness of liberation. How is it attained? What is the mental path that needs to be cultivated so as to attain liberation from suffering. This now comes to the final section. So at the bottom of page 179, determining the nature of the path leading to liberation. So this is important. Now, looking at the first part, through meditation on the fault of existence, as explained above, an intense desire to definitely emerge from cyclic existence, and owing to that, the need to avert cyclic existence arises. So through meditation on the fault of cyclic existence explained above. So this refers to this presentation we've seen thus far, meditating on the varieties of experiences of suffering that pervade samsara. So reflecting on true sufferings, as well as the causes of true suffering. That leads to an intense desire to definitely emerge from cyclic existence. Recognizing that there is nothing of abiding value worthy of our efforts that are within samsara, but recognizing that freedom is possible. One wants to emerge from these suffering realms and becomes determined to do so, develops an intense desire to do so. And owing to that, the need to avert cyclic existence arises. So how then, the question then will be, how to avert cyclic existence? What is the mental path that needs to be cultivated, or the technique that needs to be cultivated? What is the technique to cultivate the mental path? Well, this now has 2 points, so reading further. The need to avert cyclic existence arises. Therefore, 2 points are made in this regard. 2 points in terms of the cultivation of the path that leads to liberation. The mental path that needs to be cultivated that leads to liberation. The first is the kind of life through which cyclic existence is averted. So this is the first part we'll come to in a moment, and it is followed by the second, the kind of path to cultivate. So the kind of path to cultivate to avert it. Can be translated differently. The kind of mental path to meditate in order to avert it. So cultivate or meditate a mental path in order to gain freedom from cyclic existence. That's the second point. So look briefly at both of these points. So the first, the kind of life through which cyclic existence is averted. That is a precious human rebirth, the very life that we have each attained. This is the ideal basis by which one can break this wheel of samsara, one's own individual wheel of samsara, and gain freedom. The second point, the kind of path to cultivate, to avert it. So this, the path to meditate on, to cultivate within, are the 6 practices, those of generosity, of ethical restraint, of patience, of enthusiastic perseverance, concentration, and sickly wisdom. It's through cultivating these 6 mental paths that one will avert cyclic existence, gain liberation from cyclic existence. So this precious human rebirth is a human rebirth that is deemed precious because of having 18 qualities, the 18 freedoms and endowments. So this term freedom here, it's a different Tibetan term as well from the freedom we have been speaking about thus far. So it's translated either as freedoms or leisures. So what it refers to is having the freedom or the leisure to practice the Dharma. That is the meaning of this term, freedom or leisure. Again, it's a different Tibetan word from freedom from cyclic existence, freedom from suffering. And it refers to having the freedom or leisure to practice the Dharma. For example, if one is born in any of the lower realms, in the hells or as a spirit or as an animal, one has no opportunity to practice the Dharma. One doesn't have the leisure or the freedom to practice the Dharma. So, turning over the page to 180, it starts with a quotation from Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, which again I needed to retranslate. But just in this, bear in mind the meaning of freedom and leisure. So my retranslation, having obtained leisure which is without those 8 faults of unfree states, which is called birth, exert yourself, striving to overcome birth. So I'll read it again. Having obtained leisure which is without those 8 faults of unfree states, which is called birth, exert yourself, striving to overcome birth. So read my retranslation again, but anyway, we're looking at the book in English, the second line. Having obtained leisure which is without those 8 faults of unfree states, which is called birth, exert yourself, striving to overcome birth. So the first line in the Tibetan is 8 faults of unfree states, which is called birth. So this is referring to having attained a rebirth that is free of 8 unfree states, or 8 faults that lead to a lack of freedom or leisure to engage in the Dharma. So this refers to a rebirth most commonly as a precious human rebirth, but it can also refer to a rebirth of certain types of gods. So these freedoms that one has attained is that one is free of being born as in the hell realms, free of being born as a spirit, free of being born as an animal, and free of being born as a long life god. So these are the 4 of the 8 unfree states that we have gained freedom from. And the meaning is, if one is born in any of those, one does not have the opportunity or the capacity to engage in the Dharma. Therefore, one's rebirth is not considered precious. And then one has also gained a freedom from 4 other states, from being born in an area where the Dharma doesn't exist. So this is called a border country, so where the Dharma is just non-existent. Or being born, so that's a further freedom, the 5th. Another is in relation to, well, there may be the Dharma, one just has no interest in the Dharma, no faith in the Dharma at all. So the Dharma is available, accessible, but one lacks any interest in it. That's the 6th. And the 7th would be that one has strong wrong views, such as not accepting the particular views of the Dharma. So due to having strong wrong views, one is unable to engage in the Dharma. And the final state of freedom attained is having we have complete faculties. So this refers to our senses, but also to mental faculty, that we have the intelligence to be able to delve into the Dharma. So these are the 8 freedoms that have been attained with this precious human rebirth. So I'm going to explain there in brief the whole verse. I'll just read it again. From Letter to a Friend. Having obtained the leisure which is without those 8 faults of unfree state, which is called birth, exert yourself, striving to overcome birth. So recognizing that one has attained this freedom, this leisure, utilize this leisure to gain freedom from cyclic existence, the meaning of birth. Now reading from Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation below. As it is set forth here, you need to avert cyclic existence at this time when you have attained freedoms and endowments. For it has already been explained that in the unfree states, there is no opportunity to avert it. So this was explained much earlier when we were looking at the trainings that are shared with practitioners of initial capacity, where we looked at all 18 qualities, and that merely attaining the 18 qualities doesn't make a rebirth precious. It's what how one utilizes it, strive to fulfill the potential. And that is what one is encouraged to do here. But that was looked at in some detail previously. Here the recognition is that this precious opportunity that we have, this we need to embrace, make the use of it, not let these freedoms and endowments go to waste, lost in distraction, always too busy with this and that, but rather strive to live a meaningful life. Here, it's not just a case of recognizing what we've obtained, but recognize now is the time to utilize what I've obtained, not to delay, not to procrastinate. So this is important because it's through procrastination that so much time has already passed. Now at this point, having been inspired by reflecting on the sufferings of samsara and the possibility of gaining freedom from samsara, we should utilize what remains of this opportunity. Because the delusion of thinking, I have time, this is something we have to challenge. Because all too often, someone will have the thought, this life, I have too many responsibilities. When I look at the decisions I've made up to this point, I have too many responsibilities. I do not have the opportunity to apply myself. But I will make the prayers, have the aspiration, next life. Next life, from a young age, I'll apply myself and make great effort from the start. So this delusion is all too easy to arise and to be embraced. In this way, one will continue to spend the rest of what remains of this life lost in distraction, following this desire, complaining about that problem, wasting this opportunity. Wasting it because one hasn't recognized the reality of our situation. Firstly, we've seen throughout this presentation on the training shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, there is nothing of abiding value in samsara. So thinking, next year will be better, next life will be better, this is a delusion. There is no better situation to hope for than what we have achieved right now. Again, there's procrastination that leads us to think, I will have more time in the future. We should know already by now in life, this is not going to come to pass. And to hope that next life will be better, what is this based on? Next life will be a product of the causes we have created. And we can have no certainty what those causes, what causes will ripen at the end of this life. We can have no certainty about whether next life, how good or not it will be. The reality of our situation, the truth of our situation, is we have no idea what quality of rebirth awaits us. We also have no idea when that rebirth will come. We cannot sit here and say, next year I'll have more time than this year. That we do not know. Also, we do not know if next year we'll even be in this body or not. That is the reality of the situation of everyone here. Whether you're young, whether you're middle-aged, or you're near the end of your life. None of us knows when our lives will end. There is no certainty. The young die before the elderly. The healthy die before the ill. This is the reality of our situation. This needs to be recognized and taken to heart. Otherwise, by continuing to delay, continuing to procrastinate, thinking that this list of activity that needs to be accomplished, that when it's done I will have time, that just results in delay. And suddenly another year has passed, and then another year has passed. And we look back at this cycle of years, or the series of years, that we didn't utilize that well. And then we find, my health is not what it once was. My mental capacity is not what it once was. That is the reality of our situation. We need to recognize this, embrace what we have, and no longer deceive ourselves, thinking that better days lie ahead. We really do not know. So in this regard now, quotations are presented. The first is from the great yogi Geshe Thubten Rabten. Now is the time to distinguish ourselves from cattle. Geshe Thubten Rabten says, now is the time to distinguish ourselves from cattle. So, on one level, we really are not that different from animals on a physical level and in terms of what people generally prioritize with their life. It's not vastly different from animals. Animals, we recognize, are solely concerned with overcoming this life's problems and enjoying this life's pleasures. That's it. They don't have the capacity to think beyond that. So if we want to distinguish ourselves from animals, the way to do so is not through having ever more pleasures and having less problems in our life. That's still following the same interests, in pursuing the same interests that animals pursue. Eating, spending time with their community of friends, and so forth. This is what animals do and enjoy doing. When they have problems, they try and move away from the problem, and that's it. And this is, quite frankly, the way many people live their lives, despite their incredible mental capacity. They use the standout distinguishing feature of a human rebirth, mental capacity, to achieve happiness in this life and to overcome problems of this life. That's all. It's just a different degree of expression of animals. So this is how many people live. Not too surprising, we are all desire realm beings. But the great difference between ourselves and animals is animals do not have the freedom of not being born as animals, something we have. We have this freedom, we have this leisure, which means we have the capacity to live a life of great meaning. Animals, even those who live with tremendous comfort inside of a home of a loving caregiver, they live very comfortable lives, but they can do nothing more with their life other than enjoy the pleasures of this life and try and overcome this life's problems. But for us, because of our mental capacity, we can do so much more. So this we need to recognize what we are being drawn towards, what we're being averted from, see our way of thinking and ask ourselves the question again and again, am I just being like an animal, caught up in achieving pleasures of this life and overcoming the insignificant problems of this life? Am I utilizing my full capacity, this leisure, this freedom I've achieved? Recognizing this then, one will embrace the opportunity one has, not let it go to waste, not wait until this mythical time when we have abundant freedom. Now is the time. Now is actually when we have this freedom. So the meaning of this quotation from Tsongkhapa Rinchen is that now is the time. Do not delay. Now, from now, strive for freedom. Then there's a second quotation from Potawa. Potawa also said, since it has not yet stopped by itself while we were roaming about so long, it will also not stop now. It will also not now stop by itself. Therefore, we must avert it. Looking at what Potawa said, since it has not yet stopped by itself while we were roaming about so long. So this is drawing our mind back to this reflection on the vast number of lives we've already lived up to this point. And every life ended under the power of karma and affliction, and the new life was taken under the power of karma and affliction. In this way, helplessly, we were thrown from one situation of suffering into the next situation of suffering. On one hand, there was great change often between births. Our bodies would be vastly different. Perhaps the realm would be vastly different. The life form could also be vastly different. But on the other hand, each and every life was the same, in that we've only ever known being bound in this prison of samsara. This has never changed. While circumstances vary, suffering has always accompanied us. It continues, it will also not now stop by itself. Samsara is not going to end by itself, and merely wishing for something better, merely wishing for it to end, is an insufficient cause. Samsara cannot end causelessly, and it cannot end by an insufficient cause. Rather, it continues, therefore we must avert it. We need to apply ourselves. Without our concentrated effort from now, we will continue to be thrown around by our karma, tossed around in various realms of suffering. It's only us making the firm decision from now onwards to strive to abandon the causes of suffering and embrace the causes of liberation, that liberation will be achieved. This is the crossroads that we find ourselves at. Here we've been guided by Potua to recognize that we are standing at a crossroads, a border, a time to make a firm decision that from now onwards that I need to strive for liberation. Liberation will not happen for us, and end to suffering will not just happen for us. It requires my active and consistent engagement. And then the quotation concludes with, however, the time to avert it is right now, that we have obtained the freedoms and endowments. So here recognizing that while we hold the potential for this to cultivate this precious path in our hands, now is the opportunity to embrace this in a sustained and consistent way to bring an end to our samsaric rebirths. So here in this paragraph just concluded, we looked at the distinction between having an ordinary human rebirth and a human rebirth that has been recognized and embraced as precious. Now we come to the next paragraph that looks at the distinction between the ordained and the non-ordained, or the utilization of this life as an ordained or non-ordained person. Reading from the text, and just as a translator, I don't like this term layperson, so I've translated it in a literal manner. And Gena read as far as halfway into the next sentence. Even more than that, those dwelling in a household have many obstacles to accomplish the Dharma and have the disadvantage of numerous faults, since those who are ordained avert them. Maybe up to there? Yeah, since those who are ordained avert them. Even more than that, those dwelling in a household have many obstacles to accomplishing the Dharma. This refers to the many activities that are required in order to maintain a household and all that a household involves. So this will mean needing to have a career, to put time and energy into one's secular education, as well as then going to work and all those the activity associated with that. Not just the activity of working, but then that mental energy that is consumed. And then having a household, it doesn't just require financial obligations, but one is likely to have a family. So whether one has children and children that need to then be raised, that of course takes a lot of time and attention, but one is also going to have other family commitments that again will take one's time and attention. So through all this activity, it becomes difficult to focus on one's mind. And thereby, through these interactions that one has throughout one's day, it's likely one is going to experience a lot of disharmony, or disharmony is much more likely to be experienced. And from this, the sentence continues, and have the disadvantages of numerous faults. So this means the opportunities for the afflictions to arise come about readily. Afflictions such as anger, attachment, competitiveness, jealousy, and so forth, because of the need to maintain a household and all that involves, one is much more susceptible to having for the afflictions to arise, and it's more challenging to deal with them. Since those who are ordained avert them, so the term here, correctly translated as ordained, it literally means having gone forth from dwelling in a household. So having gone forth from dwelling in a household can avert them. So that's more literal. And what it refers to is those who have ordained do not need to engage in a career, earning a living, taking responsibility for a household, and all that entails, but are rather dependent directly on the generosity and kindness of others to sustain themselves materially. The purpose of that is to have more time to deal with the mind, to deal with the afflictions in the mind, to cultivate the qualities of the Dharma within. And that's not doesn't come solely through not having to engage in a career, but also without family responsibilities, in particular of parenting or broader family responsibilities, not having them at all to the same extent. So thereby, of the two, being a householder or having gone forth from the household life, that is certainly preferable due to the opportunity that is presented. So for the ordinary beings, those who have not attained the paths of a bodhisattva, being ordained produces far more favorable activities, favorable circumstances to deal with one's mind, to transform one's mind through the accumulation of virtue and the subduing and eradication of the afflictions. And this comes about due to having far more time through not having a career, not having family responsibilities. So through less activities and less problems that come about from being so busy, it is far easier for those who have gone forth from the household life to transform their minds. For bodhisattvas, it's quite different, because the bodhisattva's mind is so developed that they can embrace activity without their mind being overwhelmed or distracted from their purpose. So for bodhisattvas, it's quite a different story. But for those who aspire to the paths of bodhisattvas, it is an ideal life, a way of living, so as to transform one's mind and join the ranks of bodhisattvas. Since those who are ordained avert them, the ordained have the best life for averting cyclic existence. So again, this presents that having more time means that one can embrace the opportunity far more easily to transform one's mind. Therefore, this is a preferable way of living if one is wanting to attain freedom from samsara. And the text continues, that is why the wise should clearly delight in ordination. So the wise, it's a good translation. It used to be translated more as scholar. It refers to someone who's knowledgeable in the Dharma, has gained some experience of the Dharma. So that is why the wise should clearly, that word was missed, clearly delight in ordination. Then Lama Tsongkhapa quotes from the Buddha. The Questions of Householder Ugra Sutra says that bodhisattvas, again I've just changed the translation, bodhisattvas who dwell in households should aspire to ordination. And here, or maybe to be more literal, says that bodhisattvas who dwell in households should aspire to go forth. So going forth, this mainly refers to aspiring to full ordination. So that first word, ordination, is this word that literally means go forth. And then there's a term from the Vinaya, full ordination, that refers to the full ordination of monks and nuns. So here the Buddha is saying that non-ordained bodhisattvas should aspire to ordination, to going forth. So they are living in a household, living that life, and they should at least hold as aspiration, through seeing the benefits of ordination, hold as an aspiration to ordain. And then from Ornament for Mahayana Sutras, I'll just change the first line a little bit. Those who have joined the ordained have limitless excellent qualities. Thus, those exerting themselves in vows excel over householder bodhisattvas. So the first line again, those who have joined the ordained have limitless excellent qualities. So this refers to that when one ordains, one of course takes vows. So by keeping one's vows, in particular the 4 root vows, then one accumulates virtue continuously. So this is the case with having vows, but these vows of the ordained are of course only on the continuum of the ordained. And we see then, therefore, in the 3rd and 4th line, those exerting themselves in vows, so referring to the vows of the ordained, excel over householder bodhisattvas. And this is because of the greater number of vows that are being kept, and therefore the greater the amount of virtue being accumulated, which enhances one's spiritual development and capacity to be of benefit. And Lama Tsongkhapa then gives commentary. Thus, ordination is not only praised for the attainment of their complete release, that is liberation from cyclic existence, so in other words, complete release, that is liberation from cyclic existence, but is also presented as the best basis for the accomplishment of omniscience by way of the perfections and mantra. So here, Lama Tsongkhapa is stating that whatever one's goal is in the Dharma, whether it is to solely gain liberation from samsara, individual liberation, their ordination is the best basis to make the most of one's precious human rebirth and achieve individual liberation. But if one holds as one's objective the wish to become a bodhisattva, or not only to become a bodhisattva, but once a bodhisattva, to become a Buddha for the sake of all beings, then also being ordained is the supreme basis. And if one's method to become a Buddha, which will necessarily be that of the Mahayana, is that of the Sutra tradition or the Tantric tradition, then ordination is the supreme basis for doing so. And this is the meaning of the second part of the sentence, but is also presented as the best basis for the accomplishment of omniscience, so Buddhahood, by way of the perfections, that's the sutra vehicle, and mantra, so the tantric vehicle. So whether in the first half of the sentence one is striving for individual liberation, or in the second part of the sentence for Buddhahood by means of either the sutra or tantric methods, ordination is the supreme basis. So in this sentence thus far, Lama Tsongkhapa shows that whether one is striving for the goals of the Theravada or the Mahayana, and for the Mahayana, whether by means of sutra or tantra, ordination is the best basis to make the most of this precious human rebirth, to achieve such a goal. Now it continues with the reasoning. Among the three vows are those of individual liberation, or the pradimoksha, those of the bodhisattva, and those of secret mantra. So those are the three sets of vows. The vows of ordination are those of pradimoksha. That is why you should respect the pradimoksha vows as the root of the teachings. The pradimoksha vows, which include those of ordination, are the root of the teachings, the basis upon which the other sets of vows are attained. It's a clear reason to see the advantage of ordination, no matter what one's goal is, whether it is that of individual liberation or the attainment of Buddhahood for the sake of others, by means of either sutra or tantra. The benefit, or a benefit, that ordination brings is that there is a greater opportunity to practice the Dharma because there is more time in one's life. There's more focus. There is less distraction, less being drawn to this and that, less in terms of life's challenges, life's problems and pressures. This means that the opportunity to cultivate the Dharma within, to transform one's mind, that opportunity is far greater for those who are ordained. Lama Tsongkhapa, in how he lived his life, he showed a perfect example of how to practice Tantra. In that, he, and again, I gave some quotation, which as a translator I don't know. So Lama Tsongkhapa showed the way to practice Tantra in the most effective manner, which is through living within the confines of excellent ethics. So one shows, as an ordained person, the aspect of living as an ordained person, living a subdued life without the various responsibilities of a householder in terms of family and career and so forth. And living the subdued life in accordance with the Vinaya. So without the responsibilities of a householder, the signs of a householder, such as long hair and a home with many possessions and ornaments and this kind of thing. So living the simple, subdued life. But within, whilst the external is simple and subdued, the inner world that is being cultivated is rich, with the motivation of bodhicitta, engaging in the actual generation stage, the actual completion stages. This is how Lama Tsongkhapa lived. From the outside, he seemed like a simple practitioner, a simple monk, nothing extraordinary, but very subdued. He didn't show the need to have a consort with him, to have his hair in a particular style. Rather, he showed a very simple presentation, but inside what he did with his mind was quite remarkable. And this was not just how he lived his life, but he showed this is the example to follow. This is the most skillful way to cultivate the tantric paths within this union of sutra and tantra within a single mind. And that then brings us to the union of sutra and tantra, brings us to an end for this week. So until a fortnight from now, thank you.